Pack your things and get out, now. Regional Manager Richard. Caldwell stood in the middle of the employee break room at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Terminal C, his arms crossed over his chest, his face twisted into an expression of disgust. Around him, a dozen airport staff members had frozen mid-conversation, their coffee cups suspended in air, all eyes locked on the scene unfolding before them. I stood there in my uniform, badge still clipped to my collar, staring at the man who had just fired me in front of everyone. My name is Lily Morrison. I'm 34 years old, and until 30 seconds ago, I had worked as a customer service representative at this airport for 6 years. 6 years of early morning shifts, angry passengers, delayed flights, and doing everything exactly by the book. Mr. Caldwell, I don't understand, I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. What did I do wrong? He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound echoed off the break room walls like broken glass. What did you do wrong? He repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. Lily, look at yourself. Look at this. He gestured vaguely at me, his hand moving in a circle. You don't have the appearance we need representing this airline. Our premium passengers expect a certain standard, and you're not it. The room went completely silent. Someone gasped. I heard a coffee mug being set down too hard on a table. I had known Richard Caldwell was prejudiced. I'd seen the signs for months. The way he assigned the best shifts and premium gates to certain employees while giving others the worst hours. The way he smiled at blonde Jennifer from gate B12 while barely acknowledging me. The way his eyes would scan right past black and brown faces during team meetings as if we were invisible. Just last week, he'd reassigned me from the first-class check-in counter to baggage claims without explanation. When I'd asked why, he'd said something vague about optimizing customer experience. I'd let it go. I needed this job. I had bills to pay. I had a daughter, past tense. Because 3 days ago, my 7-year-old daughter Emma died in a car accident. The funeral was this afternoon, in 4 hours. I had my black dress already laid out at home. I had written a eulogy I could barely read without breaking down. I had arranged for my mother to pick me up from work early so we could go to the church together. And this morning, when I'd arrived for my shift and quietly reminded Richard that I needed to leave by noon for my daughter's funeral, he had looked me dead in the eye and said, I need you until 5. We're understaffed. But sir, it's my daughter's funeral. Dead don't come back, Lily. Jobs do. You leave early, don't bother coming back at all. I had worked the shift anyway because I couldn't afford to lose this job. I was a single mother with a mortgage, medical bills from Emma's hospital stay, and funeral costs I was still figuring out how to pay. I had swallowed my grief, put on my uniform, and showed up. And now, standing in this break room with everyone watching, Richard Caldwell was firing me anyway. This is discrimination, I said quietly. You can't fire someone for their appearance. That's illegal. I can fire you for poor performance, Richard shot back smoothly. And lately, you've been distracted, emotional, making errors. This morning you took 15 extra minutes on your break. I was in the bathroom crying because my daughter is dead and her funeral is in 4 hours, and you won't let me go. The words came out louder than I intended. Harder. Raw. Richard's face didn't change. No sympathy. No remorse. Nothing. That's not my problem, Lily. Personal issues can't interfere with work. You're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. He turned to walk away, clearly considering the conversation over. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice before it shatters completely? You're making a mistake, I said. And my voice was different now. Calmer. Colder. Richard paused at the door and glanced back at me with that same contemptuous smirk. The only mistake was keeping you this long. You people always think you deserve special treatment. Newsflash. You don't. You people. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. As security guards appeared to escort me from the building, as my coworkers watched in stunned silence as I walked through that airport for what Richard assumed would be the last time, he had no idea what he'd just done. He had no idea who I really was. He had no idea that this distracted, emotional employee He'd just humiliated and fired was about to become his worst nightmare. But he would find out soon enough. If this story of injustice and hidden power has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to see how a grieving mother's quiet strength becomes the force that brings down an empire of cruelty. Because Richard Caldwell had just fired the wrong woman on the worst possible day. And what he didn't know about my real identity was about to cost him everything he'd built his arrogant career on. The security guards walked on either side of me through Terminal C like I was a criminal. Passengers stared. My coworkers pretended not to see. Jennifer from Gate B12 actually turned her back when I walked past. The lead security officer, Marcus, an older black man I'd known for years, leaned in close as we approached the exit. "I'm sorry, Lily," he whispered. "I heard what happened. This isn't right." I nodded, unable to speak. If I opened my mouth, I would scream or cry or both. At the employee exit, Marcus handed me a manila envelope. "Your final paycheck. HR processed it fast." He paused. Too fast. Like they were expecting this. That's when it clicked. Richard hadn't fired me on impulse. He'd planned this. He'd prepared the paperwork. He'd been waiting for an excuse, any excuse, and my grief had given him the perfect opportunity. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a check for $847.32. 2 weeks of pay minus deductions. That was it. 6 years reduced to $800. "They also included this," Marcus said quietly, handing me a second paper. It was a termination letter, signed by Richard Caldwell. Reason for termination: excessive absenteeism and poor customer service performance. Both were lies. I hadn't missed a single day in 2 years. My customer satisfaction scores were consistently in the top 10%. "He's covering his tracks," I said, reading the document. "Always does," Marcus replied, his jaw tight with anger. "That man has gotten away with this for years. Last year he pushed out 3 black employees and 2 Latinos. Always finds a legal-sounding reason. HR backs him every time because he brings in revenue at the premium gates." I looked up at Marcus. "Why didn't anyone report him?" "Some tried. Corporate swept it under the rug. Richard's uncle is on the airline's board of directors. He's untouchable." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "But Lily, if you wanted to fight this..." "I can't," I interrupted. "I have to bury my daughter in 3 hours. I can't fight anything right now." Marcus squeezed my shoulder gently. "I understand." "I'm so sorry for your loss." I walked out of the airport into the brutal Texas heat. It was barely noon, and the temperature was already climbing toward 90 degrees. My car was parked in Employee Lot D, a 15-minute walk away because I'd arrived late that morning after spending 2 hours at the funeral home finalizing arrangements. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Are you coming?" "The service starts at 2 p.m. People are already arriving." I texted back. "On my way." But I wasn't. I sat in my car in that parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, and I broke. Completely broke. Sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. Screamed until my throat was raw. Pounded the dashboard until my hands hurt. My daughter was dead. My job was gone. And the man responsible for at least one of those tragedies was back in that air-conditioned terminal, probably laughing about it. Emma had been everything. My surprise baby. My second chance after a divorce that nearly destroyed me. She'd loved airplanes. Used to beg me to take her to work so she could watch the planes take off. She'd wanted to be a pilot when she grew up. "Mommy, I'm gonna fly all over the world," she'd said just 2 weeks before the accident, her gap-toothed smile bright with dreams. Now she was in a casket. And I'd missed her final hours because Richard Caldwell needed someone to work gate C7. My phone rang. Not my mother this time. An unknown number with a 214 area code. Dallas. I answered, my voice wrecked. "Hello? Miss Morrison? This is Jennifer Kwan from Dallas Morning News. We heard about an incident at DFW Airport today involving your termination. We're running a story on workplace discrimination and wondered if you'd be willing to comment." My breath caught. "How did you already know about this?" "Someone from inside the airport contacted us." They said you were fired in front of multiple witnesses, and that discriminatory language was used. They also mentioned..." She paused. "They mentioned your daughter's funeral is today. Is that true?" Whoever had called the press, they'd acted fast. Maybe Marcus, maybe one of my coworkers who'd watched in horrified silence. "I can't talk right now," I said. "I have to go bury my child. I understand. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. But Miss Morrison, if you ever want to tell your story, we're here." "What happened to you today isn't right." I hung up without responding. At the funeral, I stood at the front of a small church in Oak Cliff, staring at a casket that was too small, surrounded by flowers I couldn't afford, listening to a pastor speak about God's plan while wanting to scream that there was no plan that justified this. 30 people attended. My mother, Emma's father, who'd barely been in her life but showed up for appearances, a handful of friends, some neighbors, Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who cried harder than anyone. I delivered my eulogy on autopilot. Words about joy and laughter and a little girl who loved airplanes. I didn't mention that I'd been fired that morning. I didn't mention Richard Caldwell. I kept my rage buried under grief because this moment was for Emma, not for revenge. But when I got home that evening, alone in a house that still smelled like my daughter's strawberry shampoo, I found 17 missed calls. 3 from the Dallas Morning News, 2 from local TV stations, 5 from coworkers expressing sympathy and outrage, and 7 from a number I didn't recognize. I listened to the voicemail from the unknown number. "Miss Morrison, my name is Patricia Chen. I'm an employment attorney specializing in discrimination cases. I was contacted by someone who witnessed what happened to you today. I'd like to offer my services pro bono if you're interested in pursuing legal action. What was done to you was illegal, immoral, and actionable. Please call me back." I sat on Emma's bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals, holding her favorite blanket, and I made a decision. Richard Caldwell thought he'd won. Thought he'd eliminated a problem employee. Thought he could continue running his little kingdom of prejudice without consequences. He'd miscalculated in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Because the distracted emotional employee he'd fired wasn't just a customer service representative. That had been a cover. A temporary situation. A gap year that had turned into 6 years because life had happened. Because Emma had needed stability, because sometimes you put your real life on hold for the people you love. But Emma was gone now. And the only thing keeping me silent, keeping me small, keeping me in that underpaid position at that airport, had been taken from me. Richard Caldwell had no idea that 3 months ago, before the accident, I'd received a very specific email. An email I'd planned to decline because it would mean relocating Emma, disrupting her school, changing everything. But circumstances had changed. I opened my laptop and pulled up that email, sent from Morrison Holdings Group corporate headquarters. The subject line read, "Board vote results, CEO position." My finger hovered over the reply button as I thought about Richard's smug face, his cruel words, his certainty that he was untouchable. Not anymore. Because tomorrow, Lily Morrison, the woman he'd just humiliated and fired, would be walking back into that airport. Not as an employee. As something he'd never see coming until it was far too late to save himself. The next morning, I sat across from Patricia Chen in a downtown Dallas law office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, wearing a navy suit that screamed competence. "Walk me through exactly what happened," she said, pen poised over a legal pad. I recounted everything. Richard's comments, the public humiliation, the termination letter with false accusations, the "you people" remark that had made my blood run cold. Patricia's expression darkened with each detail. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Miss Morrison, what happened to you is textbook discrimination, hostile work environment, wrongful termination, and possibly retaliation. With the witnesses you mentioned, we have a strong case." She paused. "But I need to know, are you prepared for what comes next? Richard Caldwell won't go down quietly. Men like him never do." I thought about that question. Was I prepared? 24 hours ago, I would have said no. 24 hours ago, I was a grieving mother who just wanted to survive each day. But something had shifted during Emma's funeral. Standing over that small casket, I'd made a promise. Not just to seek justice for myself, but to make sure no other employee would suffer what I had. I'm ready, I said. Patricia smiled. Good. Then let's destroy him. Legally speaking, of course. We spent the next 2 hours building the case. Patricia had already contacted 3 of my former coworkers who'd witnessed the break room incident. All 3 were willing to provide statements. Marcus, the security guard, had even kept the original termination paperwork before HR could revise it. There's something else, Patricia said, sliding a folder across her desk. I did some research on Richard Caldwell last night. This isn't his first incident. Inside the folder were copies of complaints. 5 different employees over the past 3 years, all minorities. All terminated under suspiciously similar circumstances. All complaints buried by HR. How did you get these? I asked. I have sources. Let's leave it at that. Patricia leaned forward. Lily, this man has a pattern, a documented pattern. And patterns are exactly what juries love to see. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus from Airport Security. You need to see this. Attached was a screenshot from Richard Caldwell's Facebook page, posted just 2 hours ago. The post showed Richard at what looked like an expensive restaurant, wine glass raised, smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Cleaned house at work today." Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight to let the real talent shine. Here's to maintaining standards. #leadership #excellence, #no excuses. The comments below were full of congratulations from his friends and colleagues. Not one person questioned what dead weight meant. Not one person asked who he'd fired or why. But someone had commented, "Heard you finally got rid of that girl from gate services. About time." Richard had replied, "Should have done it months ago. Place already feels classier." I stared at that screen, my hands shaking. Not with fear. With fury. He's celebrating, I said quietly, showing Patricia the screenshot. He's actually celebrating firing me on the day of my daughter's funeral. Patricia's jaw tightened. This is evidence. Screenshot everything. This shows consciousness of guilt, malice, and complete lack of remorse. She looked at me carefully. Lily, cases like this can take months or years. Are you financially stable enough to wait for a settlement or verdict? That's when I decided it was time to tell her the truth. Patricia, there's something I need to explain about who I am. I pulled out my laptop and opened the email I'd been staring at for 2 days. The one from Morrison Holdings Group. The one offering me the CEO position. Patricia read it, her eyes widening with each line. When she looked up, her expression had changed completely. Wait, Morrison Holdings Group owns 37 companies, including Southwest Regional Airlines, I finished. The airline that operates out of DFW Terminal C, the airline Richard Caldwell works for. Patricia sat back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. He fired his incoming CEO. He doesn't know that yet. The board vote was confidential. The public announcement isn't scheduled until next month. I closed my laptop. My maiden name is Morrison. After my divorce, I kept my married name Johnson for simplicity. When my father died 2 years ago, I inherited his controlling shares in the family company. The board wanted me to take over immediately, but I had Emma. She was in 2nd grade, settled in her school, happy. I couldn't uproot her life for a corporate position. So you what? Worked at the airport to stay close to her? I took a sabbatical from corporate life, wanted to understand the business from the ground up before accepting the CEO role. My father always said you can't lead people whose jobs you've never done. I smiled bitterly. Spent 6 years working every position in that airport. Baggage claim, ticketing, customer service, gate operations. Learning how things actually work versus how the board thinks they work. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. And Richard Caldwell never knew. Nobody did. I was just Lily Johnson, single mom, divorced, working a regular job. That's exactly what I wanted. Emma got stability. I got perspective. My voice cracked slightly. I was going to decline the CEO position permanently. Stay in Dallas. Raise my daughter. Let someone else run the company. But now Emma's gone, Patricia said gently. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When I found my voice again, it was steady. The board is expecting my answer by the end of this week. I was going to say no. But after yesterday, after what Richard did, I met Patricia's eyes. I'm going to accept. And then I'm going to walk into that airport and personally handle Mr. Caldwell's career. Patricia leaned forward, all business now. If you're going to be CEO, we need to be strategic. A lawsuit might look like retaliation. It could complicate things. I don't want a lawsuit, I said. I want something better. I want him to face exactly what he's been doing to people for years, publicly, professionally, permanently. What did you have in mind? I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Patricia watched as I outlined my plan. With each point, her smile grew wider. When I finished, she laughed. Actually laughed. That's brilliant. Absolutely brutal. But brilliant. Is it legal? I asked. Every bit of it. Harsh, yes. Illegal, not even close. She tapped the notebook. When are you planning to do this? Tomorrow. I'm meeting with the board tonight to officially accept the position. Tomorrow morning, I'll be announced as the new CEO. And tomorrow afternoon? I smiled, and it felt dangerous. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to pay a visit to Terminal C that evening. I sat in the Morrison Holdings Group boardroom on the 42nd floor of Renaissance Tower. 12 board members watched as I signed the contract accepting the CEO position. We're pleased to have you, Miss Morrison, the board chairman said. Your father would be proud. Thank you. I have one request before the public announcement. Of course. I want to conduct surprise operational audits at 3 of our underperforming subsidiaries tomorrow. Starting with Southwest Regional Airlines. Terminal C operations at DFW. The board members exchanged glances. That's unusual for a first-day activity. I've spent 6 years studying our operations from the inside. I know exactly where the problems are. I looked around the table. Trust me, this audit is necessary. They approved it unanimously. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Richard's Facebook post, his smug smile, his absolute certainty that he'd gotten away with it. Kept thinking about all the employees he'd pushed out before me. All the talented people whose careers he'd damaged because they didn't fit his narrow definition of acceptable. Kept thinking about Emma, and how she believed the world was fair. Mommy, if you work hard and be nice, good things happen, right? That's right, baby. But I'd lied to her. The world wasn't fair. Good people suffered. Cruel people prospered. And sometimes, if you wanted justice, you had to build it yourself. At 6 a.m., I received an email notification. The press release had gone out. Morrison Holdings Group announces new CEO, Lily Morrison, to lead multi-billion-dollar corporation. By 6:30 a.m., the business news networks were running the story. By 7 a.m., my phone was exploding with interview requests, congratulations, and messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. And at 7:15 a.m., I walked into Terminal C of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, wearing a tailored black suit, carrying a leather briefcase, accompanied by Patricia Chen, the chief of HR from corporate headquarters, and 2 members of the board's audit committee. Richard Caldwell was at his desk in the operations office, coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up when we entered. Mr. Caldwell, Patricia said, her voice cutting through the morning quiet. He glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. His eyes passed over me without recognition. Why would he recognize me? I wasn't wearing a customer service uniform. Wasn't crying, wasn't broken. I was something he'd never imagined I could be. Can I help you? He asked impatiently. Yes, I said, stepping forward. I believe we need to talk about your management practices. Richard's eyes finally focused on my face. I watched the exact moment recognition hit him. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to something close to panic. You, he said, standing up so fast his coffee sloshed onto his desk. What are you doing here? You were fired. Security. Security won't be coming, I said calmly. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. I don't take orders from your CEO? I finished. Yes, you do. As of this morning. The color drained from his face. What? Patricia stepped forward, handing him a document. Mr. Caldwell. Meet Lily Morrison, newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of Morrison Holdings Group, parent company of Southwest Regional Airlines. The airline you work for. Richard stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. His hands started shaking. This has to be a joke. It's not, said Gerald Martinez, head of the audit committee, a stern man in his 60s. Miss Morrison has been conducting an undercover operational assessment for the past 6 years. And you, Mr. Caldwell, have been failing spectacularly. I walked to Richard's desk and calmly moved his coffee cup aside. Let me tell you what's going to happen now. First, I'm going to address your staff. All of them. And you're going to stand there and listen. You can't. I can, I said, my voice harder now. And you'll remain silent unless you want to add insubordination to your growing list of offenses. Richard's face had gone from pale to red. Rage was replacing shock. This is harassment. I'll sue. I'll call my uncle on the board. Your uncle? I smiled. James Caldwell voted in favor of my appointment. Unanimously. He also voted to give me full authority to restructure underperforming divisions. I leaned against his desk. Did you know he has no idea what you've been doing here? When we showed him the complaints you've buried, the employees you've driven out, the discrimination lawsuits that corporate has been settling quietly to avoid bad press, he was horrified. That stopped Richard cold. You talked to my uncle? I talked to the entire board. Last night. For 3 hours. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. This conversation is being recorded for corporate records. Do you consent to continue? Richard's jaw clenched. He knew he was trapped. Refusing would look like guilt. Fine. I pressed record and set the phone on his desk. Patricia, please bring in the staff. Within minutes, the small operations office was packed. Customer service reps, gate agents, baggage handlers, cleaning crew, security personnel. At least 30 employees crowded into the space and spilled into the hallway. I saw Marcus near the back, his expression carefully neutral. I saw Jennifer from B12, looking confused and worried. And I saw Carmen Rodriguez, a Latina woman in her 50s who worked overnight janitorial shifts. She was someone Richard had repeatedly written up for poor performance despite her perfect attendance record. Good morning, everyone, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. My name is Lily Morrison. Some of you knew me as Lily Johnson, customer service representative. I worked alongside many of you for 6 years. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. What you didn't know is that I'm also the majority shareholder and now CEO of Morrison Holdings Group, which owns this airline. I let that sink in. For 6 years, I worked entry-level positions to understand this company from the ground up, to see what actually happens versus what gets reported to corporate. And what I found here in this terminal, under this man's management, is unacceptable. Richard started to speak. I held up one hand, and he stopped. Mr. Caldwell, would you like to explain why you fired me 2 days ago? His mouth opened and closed. The employees were staring at him now, realization dawning on their faces. You fired her? Carmen said, her voice sharp with anger. Dios mío, her daughter just died. That's not, I didn't, Richard stammered. You told me, and I quote, dead don't come back, jobs do, I said clearly. You ordered me to work through my daughter's funeral. When I couldn't, you fired me in front of a dozen witnesses, citing poor performance and absenteeism. Both were lies. Patricia handed me a folder. I opened it and began reading. Richard Caldwell, Regional Manager, Terminal C, hired August 2019. Since then, employee turnover in this terminal has increased 43%. Discrimination complaints have increased 70%. Customer satisfaction scores have dropped 18%. And somehow, you've received bonuses every year. Those numbers are out of context, Richard said desperately. The industry changed. COVID affected everything. You can't blame 5 employees, I interrupted. In 3 years. All minority workers. All terminated under suspicious circumstances. All complaints buried by HR. I looked directly at him. Marcus, would you step forward, please? Marcus came to the front, holding a manila envelope. Miss Morrison asked me to document everything I've witnessed. This contains copies of termination letters, complaint forms, and emails showing HR was pressured to close investigations. I took the envelope and pulled out Richard's Facebook post, blown up and printed on 8x10 paper. You posted this the evening you fired me. Cleaned house today. Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight. I held it up so everyone could see. You were celebrating. Celebrating firing a grieving mother on the day of her child's funeral. The room erupted. Employees were shouting. Carmen was crying. Jennifer had her hand over her mouth in shock. That's enough. Richard yelled, his face now purple with rage and humiliation. This is a setup. She's twisting everything because she's angry she got fired. Am I twisting this? I pulled out another document. Patricia had gotten it last night from corporate legal. This is a settlement agreement from 2021. Southwest Regional paid $75,000 to Kaisha Williams after she sued for discrimination. You were named as the primary defendant. The airline settled to avoid bad press. Richard's eyes went wide. That case was sealed. Not from the CEO, I said. And here's another one from 2022. Marcus Wong, $50,000. Also naming you. Also settled quietly. I set both documents on his desk. There are 3 more. All sealed. All buried. All showing a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior that corporate has been paying to hide instead of addressing. The employees were silent now, watching Richard with a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. This was his kingdom. These were the people he'd lorded over, belittled, controlled. And now they were watching him fall. Effective immediately, I said, my voice carrying across the room. Richard Caldwell is suspended without pay pending a full investigation into his conduct. He's banned from airline property and all company communications. His access badges and credentials are revoked. Gerald stepped forward with a security officer. Mr. Caldwell, please surrender your badge, keys, and company phone. Richard looked like he might actually attack someone. His hands were fisted at his sides, his breathing rapid and shallow. You can't do this. I have rights. I'll fight this. You'll what? I asked quietly. Sue for wrongful termination. Like you forced 5 other people to do. Please, Richard, try it. I would love to see you experience exactly what you've put others through. If you're watching this unfold and thinking about times you've witnessed injustice in your own workplace, subscribe to see how speaking truth to power can change everything, because this reckoning is just beginning. Richard slammed his badge and phone on the desk with such force the phone screen cracked. My uncle will hear about this. Your uncle already has, I said. He's requested a formal meeting with you next week to discuss your conduct and the family's reputation. He's not pleased. That broke him. The invincibility he'd worn like armor cracked completely. His uncle had always protected him, always smoothed things over. Without that protection, he was just a middle manager with a terrible record and multiple lawsuits. I gave 6 years to this company, Richard said, his voice breaking with rage. 6 years! I gave 6 years too, I replied. The difference is, I spent mine learning and growing. You spent yours tearing people down to make yourself feel powerful. I turned to address the staff. To everyone in this room who has felt belittled, discriminated against, or afraid to speak up, that ends today. There will be a full review of management practices in this terminal. Anyone with complaints will be heard. Anyone who faced retaliation will be compensated. And anyone who wants to see real change, I'm asking you to trust me to deliver it. Carmen raised her hand tentatively. Miss Morrison, will we have a new manager? You will. Someone who sees employees as human beings, not disposable resources. I glanced at Marcus. In fact, Marcus, I'd like to discuss a promotion with you. Interested in operations management? Marcus's eyes widened. Seriously. You've been documenting problems and protecting employees at personal risk for years. That's exactly the kind of integrity I want in leadership. The room broke into applause. Not for me, for Marcus, for themselves, for the promise of something better. Richard stood frozen, watching his former domain celebrate his downfall. The power he'd wielded, the fear he'd cultivated, the control he'd maintained, all of it was gone in less than 20 minutes. "Security will escort you from the building," I said to Richard. "Your personal items will be boxed and mailed to you." As the security officers flanked him, Richard turned to me one last time. His face was a twisted mixture of hatred and desperation. "You think you've won," he hissed. "But people like you don't last in positions like this. You'll fail. And when you do, I'll be there to watch." I met his eyes without flinching. "Richard, I've buried my child, survived your cruelty, and exposed your corruption. Whatever comes next, I promise you, I've already survived worse than anything you could possibly wish on me." They walked him out through the terminal. Passengers stared. Employees watched from their posts. And Richard Caldwell, the man who'd ruled Terminal C like his personal kingdom, left the building he'd never enter again. 6 months later, I stood in front of 200 Morrison Holdings Group employees at the Southwest Regional Airlines annual conference, not as Lily Johnson, customer service rep. As Lily Morrison, CEO. The changes had been swift and substantial. Terminal C at DFW was now the highest-rated operation in our entire airline network. Customer satisfaction scores had jumped 27%. Employee retention had increased 41%. And profitability was up 18% despite us spending more on staff wages and benefits. Marcus had accepted the operations manager position and transformed the entire culture. His first action was implementing an anonymous reporting system for discrimination complaints, one that bypassed local HR and went straight to corporate legal. Within the first month, 7 reports came in. We investigated every single one. Carmen Rodriguez, the janitorial worker Richard had repeatedly targeted, was now training supervisor for our facility staff across 3 terminals. She'd developed an innovative cross-training program that gave cleaning crew opportunities to advance into other airport positions. Jennifer from Gate B12, who turned her back when I was escorted out, had resigned. She'd sent me a letter 2 weeks later apologizing and admitting she'd stayed silent out of fear of becoming Richard's next target. I appreciated the honesty. Patricia Chun had joined Morrison Holdings as Chief Legal Officer. Her first major initiative was settling all 5 previous discrimination cases, with full transparency and additional compensation for the victims. No more sealed settlements. No more buried complaints. As for Richard Caldwell, his fall had been comprehensive and very public. The discrimination investigation had uncovered even more than we'd initially known. Email chains showing him coaching managers and other terminals on how to legally push out minority employees. Text messages with other regional managers mocking diversity initiatives. A pattern of behavior so extensive that it had made national news. Southwest Regional Airlines had fired him for cause, meaning no severance, no benefits, no references. He'd attempted to sue for wrongful termination. The case was dismissed within 3 months. His lawyer had reportedly advised him to drop it before discovery revealed even worse conduct. His uncle, James Caldwell, had publicly disavowed Richard's actions and resigned from 2 boards to focus on family matters. Translation: managing the reputational damage his nephew had caused. Richard had tried to get hired at 3 other airlines. All 3 had rejected him after basic background checks revealed the circumstances of his termination. He'd eventually taken a position as assistant manager at a rental car company, making roughly 40% of his former salary. His social media accounts had gone silent after the first wave of news coverage. The Facebook posts celebrating my firing had been screenshot and shared thousands of times, becoming an example in corporate training sessions about what not to do. Meanwhile, I'd used my platform as CEO to launch the Emma Morrison Foundation, named after my daughter. It provided college scholarships for children who'd lost parents, and career support for single parents trying to advance professionally. The foundation's mission statement included Emma's own words: "If you work hard and be nice, good things should happen." I was trying to make that true. At the conference, I finished my keynote speech about transformational leadership and opened the floor for questions. A young Black woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. "Ms. Morrison, what would you say to people who are currently experiencing discrimination at work, but feel powerless to report it?" I thought carefully before answering. I'd say that feeling powerless is exactly what abusive managers count on. They want you silent. They want you scared. They want you to believe that speaking up will only make things worse. I paused. But here's what I learned. Staying silent doesn't protect you. It protects them. And the moment you find your voice, even if it shakes, even if you're terrified, that's when real change becomes possible. Another hand went up. An older Latino man. Do you regret taking that customer service job instead of accepting the CEO position 6 years earlier? Never, I said immediately. Those 6 years taught me more about leadership than any business school could have. I learned what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to have your concerns ignored by people who see you as beneath them. That perspective made me a better leader. And it gave me 6 more years with my daughter, which I'll never regret. After the conference, Patricia found me in the executive lounge. You have a visitor. Says it's personal. I walked to the lobby and found Marcus waiting, looking uncomfortable in a suit instead of his security uniform. Marcus, you didn't have to come all the way downtown. He handed me an envelope. The Terminal C staff wanted you to have this. Inside was a card signed by over 100 employees. The front read, "Thank you for seeing us." I had to blink back tears reading the messages inside. You gave me my dignity back. Carmen. My daughter said she wants to be like you when she grows up. Marcus. I'm not afraid to come to work anymore. Sarah J. Gate Services. You prove that doing the right thing matters. Kevin T. Baggage claim. Marcus cleared his throat. There's something else. We took up a collection. Donated to the Emma Morrison Foundation in your daughter's name. It's not much, but it's everything, I said, my voice breaking. Thank you. That evening, I visited Emma's grave for the first time since the funeral. I'd been too angry, too broken, too focused on survival and revenge. But standing there now, 6 months later, I could finally breathe. I did it, baby, I whispered, placing fresh flowers on the headstone. I made sure what happened to Mommy won't happen to other people. I made something good out of something terrible. The wind rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, I could almost hear her voice. See, Mommy? Good things do happen when you work hard and be nice. Not always, Emma. Not easily. But sometimes, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Former airline executive Richard Caldwell arrested for fraud. I clicked the article. Apparently, he'd been inflating expense reports at his new job. They caught him within 4 months. I didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel vindication. Just a quiet sense of confirmation that people who build careers on cruelty eventually run out of places to hide. 3 weeks later, I received an email from someone I didn't know. The subject line read, "You saved my career." The message was from a young black woman named Jasmine who worked at one of our other terminals. She'd filed a discrimination complaint using the new anonymous system after her manager made inappropriate comments about her hair. The investigation had been swift and thorough. The manager was fired. Jasmine was promoted. I never thought anyone would listen, she wrote. I never thought my voice mattered. Thank you for proving me wrong. I forwarded the email to Patricia with a note. This is why we do the work. She replied immediately. One person at a time. One voice at a time. Until everyone knows they matter. A year after Richard fired me, I sat in my corner office on the 42nd floor, looking out over Dallas. The city looked different from up here. Bigger, full of possibility. My assistant buzzed. Miss Morrison, you have someone here without an appointment. Says her name is Keisha Williams. I recognized the name immediately. The first woman to sue Richard for discrimination back in 2021. Send her in. Keisha was in her 30s, confident, wearing business attire. Miss Morrison, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to meet you in person. Not at all. Please, sit. I heard what you did. How you exposed Richard Caldwell. How you changed the policies. She paused, emotional. When I settled my case, I had to sign an NDA. I couldn't talk about what happened. Couldn't warn other women. I've carried that guilt for 3 years, knowing he was still out there, still hurting people. You did what you had to do to protect yourself, I said gently. Maybe, but you did what I wish I'd been brave enough to do. You didn't stay silent. You didn't take the money and disappear. You fought back, and you won. She wiped her eyes. I just wanted to say thank you. And to tell you that I'm back in the airline industry. Applied to Southwest Regional last month. Got hired last week. I smiled. Welcome back. After she left, I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping. Inside were messages from 37 employees who'd reached out over the past year. People who'd been pushed out, silenced, or broken by toxic managers across various industries. People who'd seen my story and found courage to speak up in their own workplaces. 37 voices that might have stayed silent if I hadn't found mine. That night, I wrote in my journal something I'd started doing after Emma died, a way to process everything. A year ago, I was fired by a man who thought my grief made me weak, my race made me inferior, and my position made me powerless. He was wrong on all counts. Grief made me determined. My identity made me resilient. And my low position taught me more about leadership than he'll ever understand. Richard Caldwell tried to destroy me on the worst day of my life. Instead, he gave me a reason to fight. Not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been told they don't matter, don't belong, or don't deserve dignity. The best revenge isn't cruelty. It's transformation. It's taking the pain someone inflicted and turning it into purpose. It's building something so meaningful that their attempt to break you becomes the foundation of your greatest strength. Emma wanted to believe the world was fair. It's not, but it can be better. One voice at a time. One choice at a time. One person deciding that silence protects abusers and speaking up protects everyone else. I miss my daughter every single day. But I'm living in a way that would make her proud. And maybe that's the real victory. Not destroying the person who hurt you, but becoming the person who ensures they can't hurt anyone else. I closed the journal and looked at the photo on my desk. Emma, gap-toothed and smiling, holding a toy airplane. Fly high, baby girl, I whispered. Mommy's got the ground covered, because in the end, Richard Caldwell taught me something valuable, though not what he intended. He taught me that the people who underestimate you, who dismiss you, who think your pain makes you weak, those are the people who never see the storm coming until it's already changed the landscape forever. And I had become that storm. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt invisible or powerless in your own life, subscribe and share this message. Your voice matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And the person who tries to take those things from you might just be giving you the greatest gift of all, the motivation to prove them catastrophically wrong.